This is your Daily 5 for Thursday, June 18th, 2026. Unless you have been in a news blackout for the last couple of years, you are already well aware that there is a computing component crisis going on. Largely, not entirely, but largely driven by the explosion of AI and the need for compute to drive all these AI initiatives from these different companies that are all racing to try to figure out how to make a profitable model out of their models. That was not an intentional pun, but it just got there by itself. And so, within personal computing, video games, all these different spaces, you are seeing components that are just out of the reach of the affordability of most people. And this, in the video game industry in particular, has been a really, really crucial moment, or I should say a crippling moment, because unlike personal computing, which was largely stable, people upgraded their machines. They did it often for gaming, but other specific tasks. And that industry was relatively, I would say, healthy in terms of the ebb and flow. People knew what they were dealing with, and there wasn't anything too disruptive there. But video games, even before all the AI stuff came along, were already in a really bad state because they were already at a point where video game budgets were unsustainable, where a lot of companies were jumping on trends and then seeing these big budget games flopping and failing because the trend had already been petered out by the time they were released. You've seen a lot of back and forth over where video game prices are going, like the whole thing with the GTA 6 being $100 launch, whether that's true or not, but the fact that it's been bandied about certainly indicates there's some thinking on that. And so video games in general were not in the healthiest state even before all this happened. Now, with the component prices the way that they are, and most of the people within the industry agreeing that even if prices contract, they're not going to contract to what would have been expectable levels pre-AI. So that means that components are still going to be noticeably more expensive than they were before, outside of, obviously when a brand new top-of-the-line graphics card came out, you would expect it to be ridiculously priced. But you would have mid to lower range cards that would be far more affordable. Well, they're going to be less affordable even if all the AI consumption went away tomorrow, which of course it's not going to. And so that inevitably ties back to video games because you sit there and you have to think, if before all this component shortage stuff happened, people were already playing less games because they were more expensive, because console upgrades were yielding less and less tangible benefits. If that was happening before all this, and playing video games is going to remain more expensive, even assuming prices go back to some type of stability than they were before, and like with this generation, how much more of a benefit are you going to get from upgrading? And even if you did, you would likely be paying more per video game, meaning that you would likely be able to afford fewer games to play, which erodes even further the justification for upgrading the console. And that's all assuming that the economy you exist in allows you to have enough money to be able to even play games or upgrade your console, which seems unlikely in the near future, barring some kind of major societal changes. So you put all that stuff together, and you have to wonder, specifically in video games, but you could also start bleeding this over into personal computing in general, what is the future going to look like for people who want to have a console or a computer for any type of recreation? What it seems like is the only computer most people are going to be able to afford to play anything on is going to be their phones, which largely have not been impacted by all this component shortage insanity, but will probably not stay insulated forever, meaning more people will be using older hardware to do whatever they're doing. And so if it's older hardware, it's not going to get the gains of cutting edge updates in graphics and computing and everything else because it'll be unaffordable. And so none of those games or those programs or any of that stuff is going to be accessible to these individuals who can't afford it. And so that all leads back to, again, who's going to buy all this stuff? And you could say, well, the ultra rich, but even that is a small market. You can't have major companies that subsist only on rich people constantly upgrading their stuff. Yeah, they'll pay top dollar, but let's be honest, there's far fewer of them than there are of ordinary people who can't afford anything. So I do understand why people say AI is disruptive, except I don't know that it's going to be disruptive in terms of the technology, but maybe in terms of what it exposes about the economic future of computing in general. Later.